Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm Jim Paxon. This week we'll head up the Kaibab Plateau to check on the health of the deer herd there. Then we'll go over to Schafer for the first ever stocking of catchable Gila Trout. But first, it's been a long time in the making. Finally, bighorn sheep have safe passage over Highway 93.
They look like overpasses that come from nowhere and go to nowhere. But they're actually very important to the bighorn sheep that call this country home. On February 1st, 2011, a young ram bighorn sheep took the first tentative step onto the newly constructed wildlife overpass on Highway 93 near Hoover Dam.
We were so excited and very pleased to see the first video images of the bighorn sheep actually using the overpasses. Not only do these overpasses protect motorists traveling this highly traveled corridor on US 93, but they also protect the bighorn sheep, of course, native to the Black Mountains. ADOT has spent nearly $500 million over the last decade improving US 93 from Wickenburg in Maricopa County to the new Hoover Dam bypass. The improvements continue. ADOT's long-term vision is to transform this highly traveled route into a 4-lane divided highway.
US Highway 93 is the route that most Arizonans use to access Las Vegas. It's also been designated as part of the North American Free Trade Agreement trade route, as well as part of the Canamex, the Canada-Mexico trade corridor. Increasing traffic levels and accidents, desert bighorn sheep vehicle collisions, and compromised Hoover Dam security led both federal and state agencies to act. To address these issues, Arizona Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration constructed the Hoover Dam bypass. Completed in the fall of 2010, this new roadway circumvents Hoover Dam by allowing traffic to pass over the Colorado River on a bridge downstream, but within sight of the Hoover Dam. In Arizona, 15 miles of 2-lane roadway from the Hoover Dam bypass south toward Kingman is now widened to 4 lanes. To alleviate the bighorn vehicle collision component, 3 wildlife overpasses and adjacent funnel fencing were constructed to allow wildlife to cross the road safely and exclude desert bighorn from the roadway, thereby reducing risks for motorists.
Before they started reconstruction of the roadway, we were seeing as many as 10 bighorn sheep killed per year. That also poses a safety concern for the people driving up and down the highway.
State and federal laws do mandate that the Arizona Department of Transportation look at all of the environmental impacts prior to building any roadway in Arizona.
In 2004, ADOT and Federal Highways funded a project to evaluate where these crossing structures would be placed.
So Arizona Game and Fish Department went out and collared sheep and let those sheep tell us where to put those structures with GPS collars. When we got the data back from the GPS collars, identified several locations where the sheep were trying to cross or were crossing the road. One of those is the overpass you see behind us here.
This research showed that desert bighorn sheep focused their movement along ridges that were intersected by the highway to approach and cross US 93. The ridges offered the bighorn good visibility to avoid predators, higher quality forage compared to surrounding landscapes, and terrain that offered the best possible link to larger areas of suitable sheep habitat. Data suggests that crossing structures built at these locations would be the most effective locations for crossing structures.
We've learned that desert bighorn sheep don't like underpasses and culverts. They tend to shy away from them because of the predators that might be in there. And so overpasses have become a good option for bighorn sheep.
Additionally, the cost of building overpasses was less than underpasses. In support of the recommendations, Arizona Game and Fish, ADOT, and Federal Highways committed to designing and building 3 overpasses, the first ever in Arizona and the first anywhere in the world for desert bighorn sheep. The 3 sites chosen are at mileposts 3.3, 5.2, and 12.2. The purpose of these overpasses is to minimize the impacts of fragmentation, which along with habitat loss serves as the leading factors for wildlife extinction. The bighorn sheep herd in this area is one of the largest and most important in the country, and efforts such as these are intended to help ensure the sustainability of this herd for future generations of wildlife enthusiasts, while also providing for improved safety for motorists. People come from all over the world for the watchable wildlife opportunities in Arizona. This young lady is taking home the memory of a lifetime.
Associated with the overpasses is wildlife fencing. This fencing is high enough to keep sheep from jumping it easily. The fencing funnels them down to the wildlife overpasses and a couple of bridges we have in the project, and that fencing is also linked to culverts along the project corridor so other animals can pass under the highway safely.
Built into each fence is what's called an escape ramp. When an animal gets caught inside the fence on the side of the highway, they can come to the escape ramp, jump out, and then they're not caught inside the fence corridor. A barrier, like a roadway, canal, or fencing, blocks the movement of animals from others of their kind or essential habitats.
Bighorn sheep, like all other wildlife, need access to resources to keep them alive, like water and food and summer winter range and feeding grounds and breeding grounds. And if you cut off access to that, then they don't have a way to get to those resources. And over time, you see a couple of things. You start to see genetics not getting across the roads and barriers, and that leads to inbreeding for wildlife populations, and you might see reduced fitness or the ability of those animals to have young, and all the other negative effects that come with inbreeding. And after a while, they can't get to the resources they need to survive, and over time, they can go extinct.
We have installed a digital video recording system to monitor their use or non-use of the overpasses. ADOT was very helpful with establishing this system to make it actually integrated into the structure itself to make it more robust against weather or rodents chewing through wires or whatnot. You can see a portion of the system here, which is comprised of some infrared lights, which may not catch sheep since they're daytime animals, but would catch any other animals using the overpass at night. In the center of the 2 infrared lights, you have a colored video camera that records anything crossing the structure at mid-bridge here.
The digital video recording system uses a photo beam trigger that shoots across the structure. Located about 8 to 10 inches off the deck, anything that breaks the photo beam will start all the cameras rolling at the crossing. On this bridge, we actually have 3 photo beam triggers, one in the center and then one at either end as an approach trigger. That way, biologists can catch the bighorn sheep as they approach the structure, then witness whether they actually crossed or not.
And so we also have 3 of these cameras at the west end of the overpass, and those cameras not only allow us to see sheep coming across this structure, but it also allows us to monitor the sheep who may approach the structure and decide not to cross. We're able to correlate that digital video recording of the sheep's behavior and correlate that with traffic volumes on the road to see if that has any effect on their behavior, whether they decide to cross or not to cross the structure.
All 3 overpasses have been used by bighorn sheep, and of those bighorn, a majority are male. But of all of them that make an approach, about half do cross, and they'll make multiple crossings.
We also have, to serve as a backup to our video system and to catch additional images, is a trail camera. So it snaps still photos, again, of anything crossing the structure at any time of the day. On this particular structure, we've monitored a few young rams coming down, and they were practicing headbutting as they're coming down the approach. Yeah, I think from the other highway projects we have that it's shown that the few brave animals that initially will go across, others will start to follow them, then it will just become a regular behavior in their movements.
On top of the overpasses, we have tried to match the surroundings as much as possible. When the sheep come up to the overpasses, you want it to look just like what they've been traveling through as they go across the landscape, so they're not bothered by it, or they're not alarmed by it. The idea is they just continue down the ridge that they were originally walking down and right onto the other side of the road.
This is one of the 50-foot wide structures. We have 2 of these, and the third one is double this width. So there's one structure that's 100-foot wide, and they're all 200 foot across. The data that we do collect from all these overpass structures will be analyzed. We'll be looking for the number of sheep that approach the structures, the number of sheep that cross those structures, so we can get a passage rate, and all that is correlated with the amount of traffic and time of day. We also look at those movement patterns and associated with different seasons that are important to the bighorn sheep. We'll also look at, are males using it more than females, or is it even, and how does that change as time goes on?
This project has been a partnership between the Arizona Department of Transportation, Federal Highways, Arizona Game and Fish Department, Bureau of Land Management, and the National Park Service. As far as the research project goes, the partners are ADOT through their Transportation Research Center, Game and Fish, and the Federal Aid Wildlife Restoration Program. Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society funds and manpower were invaluable to this research project as well. The upgrades to US Highway 93 will benefit the traveling public through efficiency and safety. Furthermore, the wildlife overpasses will reduce the incidence of wildlife vehicle collisions while maintaining habitat connectivity. Although it may take several years for large segments of the population to readily utilize these new structures, we've already documented their use by sheep even as the concrete seems to be barely dry. The partnership between natural resource and transportation agencies represents the first time in Arizona that wildlife research was conducted and results incorporated into project design before construction began, and represents the success in partnerships between agencies of differing disciplines but similar goals.
The North Kaibab Plateau contains some of the most beautiful and rugged country in Arizona. It covers over 1,200 square miles north of the Grand Canyon, with elevations ranging from 5,000 to 9,000 feet. The Kaibab is home to many wildlife species, including a large herd of mule deer, whose health and well-being are very important to Arizona Game and Fish, which has the responsibility for managing all wildlife in the state. So on this cold day in March, they're conducting a health assessment of the herd to determine their condition coming out of winter.
The main impetus for doing this condition testing is to assess the carrying capacity and how well the range is able to handle these deer from year to year. And then if we have a particularly bad year or a series of bad years, we'll also have a baseline of a number of years to be able to compare it to under various climatic conditions.
The study began in 2010 and is in its second year, with one more year to go. Then it'll be conducted every 3 years thereafter. The initial results are looking positive, with this herd showing signs of improvement over last year's.
Well, the health assessment, we're looking at fat levels. Using ultrasound, we measure the fat thickness. The deer this year have been in pretty good condition. I think we've had fat levels, we're measuring 1 to 3 millimeters on the back fat. Last year they were in a little bit poorer condition. We came off a real severe winter of 2009, 2010. It was probably the severest winter we've had in 20 years, and condition was low. So they've improved this year since winter was a little bit milder.
But the trick to giving a mule deer a health checkup is that first you have to catch it.
The helicopter goes out and searches for deer scattered around here on the Kaibab. There's no shortage of deer, it appears. It's tricky in this type of habitat. It's fairly heavily wooded. We try to push the deer out into the open where they can be more easily captured, but deer, like any prey species, tries to avoid capture like this, and they tend to seek the tree forested cover.
Maneuvering close to the deer takes a pilot with a lot of experience and a steady hand. Once the deer is in the right position, the gunner lets his net fly and the deer is brought down. Then, with the helicopter still hovering, the passenger jumps out to contain the deer. Of course, If the deer isn't completely subdued in the net, then the capture becomes more of a foot race. Once the deer is safely hobbled, it's blindfolded and placed in a travel bag to reduce stress on the animal and flown to the work site. When the helicopter arrives, several people with a stretcher rush out to unload the deer and carry it to the work area. The first order of business is to get its weight.
152.
Then what is often the most time-consuming and trickiest part of the procedure begins, untangling the deer from the net without injury to it or its handlers. After the deer is freed from the net and its powerful legs secured, it's carried to the medical tent where the health assessment takes place.
First thing we do when we're checking the deer after they've been captured is we look them over quickly for injuries and then also take their temperature, because it's very common for these deer to get overheated during the capture process, and if that happens and becomes too extreme, we can have a real problem with them. So we try and cool them down quickly if they come in overheated. And then the next part is to go ahead and assess their status. This year the deer seem to be looking a little bit better. There's a little more fat on their bodies, and this directly affects the milk of the doe and how well she's able to care for that fawn when it hits the ground, which is going to be here in another month or two. The sonogram is part of the condition testing. We are actually using the ultrasound to measure the depth of the fat under the skin, and we're looking at that basically at the base of the tail. The other way we assess their body condition is by feeling how much certain points of their body stick out. The one main point is the withers between the shoulder blades, and then the other is there's a ligament between the tail and the pelvis, and we feel how much of that we can pinch. So it's kind of like with people, you pinch an inch, only we're pinching in a couple of different places. The other thing we do is we do some disease assessment. We look for hemorrhagic disease, which is a viral disease that's transmitted by a culicoides gnat. We also look for blue tongue virus. Last year we had no evidence of those diseases up here. And it's more for just monitoring the basic health of the population.
The doe also receives an ear tag for identification purposes, and any injuries she may have sustained during capture are quickly attended to.
Deer are incredibly strong, incredibly feisty, with a real will to survive. And interacting up close with humans is not something they relish. And so dealing with them at that level can be very strenuous physically. And I've determined through mild injuries that it's really a young man's job, and probably when you're starting to approach the tail end of your career, that some of those duties are best left to the new guys who are young and tough and rough and tumble. Not that I don't enjoy it still, because as I said, actually laying your hands on animals and taking those measurements and dealing with them up close is something that the vast majority of society never gets to experience.
With several people collecting samples, the work goes quickly and the entire health assessment can be completed in only a few minutes. Then the deer is ready to be released. If the capture site was less than a mile from the processing location, then the deer can be released on site. In this instance, the doe is carried several yards from the tent and released facing away from the activity. When releasing an animal, it's important to be aware of any obstructions like trees or dangerous terrain such as gullies or cliffs. Generally, the hobbles are released first, then the blindfold is slipped off. Everyone lets go, and the doe quickly gets the heck out of Dodge. If the deer was captured more than a mile away from the work site, then it is placed back in its travel bag and returned to the area where it was captured. To help keep the deer calm while waiting for transport, everyone tries to keep the noise level down, since people are predators to this prey species. Once the helicopter is back on site, the deer receives a free return trip to its herd.
Well, the deer capture presents a pretty neat opportunity for somebody that's interested in wildlife and wildlife work, and that it's hands-on work. You're actually handling the animals, which really is a rare thing in this day and age. I think people often assume we're hands-on with the critters in the hills all the time, but we're really not. We observe them constantly, but actually hands-on work where we're handling the animals and taking measurements and things of that nature is really a relatively rare occurrence.
The deer population is real good here in the Kaibab. You know, this is one of those herds that has been studied a lot in the past because of its major booms and busts, and deer, probably at least 4 or more times in the past have exceeded their carrying capacity out here. And so, you know, the more information we have on the herd, we can keep it below that carry capacity level. That'll be a good thing for us. The idea behind wildlife management is to keep a stable population, stable harvest. So we don't want to see these big increases in the population and then eventual crashes, because we won't be able to provide that recreational opportunity, you know, consistently year after year.
While this study is beneficial to the people of Arizona and their mule deer population, it comes at no cost to the taxpayer. The money for this study was raised from the sale of special mule deer license tags by the Arizona Deer Association, the Mule Deer Foundation, and the Arizona Big Game Super Raffle. After 3 days of battling rough weather, 24 does were captured and released unharmed, and the survey results show a definite improvement over the previous one. The average body weight was 5 pounds heavier this year, which translates to the deer having 7% body fat, where the year before they were down to only 2.4% body fat. This means the does and their unborn fawns will have a much greater chance of survival, thereby assuring the future of this historic mule deer herd on the North Kaibab.
John Marvin from Sierra Vista caught the first one, but Robert Woods from Flagstaff set a new state record with this monster 19¼ inch, 3.35 pound Gila trout. But before they could do that, a lot of people were doing this.
This is going to be the first recreational stocking of Gila trout in Arizona. It'll be the first fishery for Gila trout in Arizona.
On February 23, 2011, the first season for Gila trout in Arizona history opened at Fry Mesa Reservoir in the Pinaleno Mountains west of the town of Schafer. The Arizona Game and Fish Department, in cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, and volunteers from Old Pueblo Trout Unlimited and the San Pedro Flycasters, stocked a reservoir with about 800 Gila trout that came from the Mora National Fish Hatchery and Technology Center in Mora, New Mexico. This is the first known fishing season for Gila trout in Arizona. Gila trout, which are a trout species native only to Arizona and New Mexico, are listed as federally threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Currently, Gila trout only occupy a small number of streams in Arizona, which are used toward recovery of the species.
Look at those buttes.
They're threatened under the Endangered Species Act, but they are fishable population as part of the 4D rule under the Endangered Species Act. And so we are able to regulate fisheries here.
Currently, fishing is closed at all Gila trout recovery streams in Arizona, including Fry Creek above the reservoir.
Everything above the reservoir is closed to fishing. That's a recovery population and it's closed to fishing right now. Hopefully it'll be open to fishing when it's got enough in there to support some angling pressure. Hopefully in the next several years that'll be open.
The Pinaleno Mountains are the only place in the world people can fish for 2 native Arizonan species of trout, the Apache trout and the Gila trout, and 5 overall trout species all in the same area.
On the north side of the mountain where the streams are flowing into the Gila River, we're going to have Gila trout. And on the south side of the river where they're flowing into the Wilcox Playa, we have Apache trout hybrids with rainbows. And then up on top at Riggs Lake, we stock also brown trout, brook trout, and rainbow trout. So if you made your trip to the Peñalillos, you could fish for all species of trout on this mountain. For recovery of the Gila trout, they recover by lineage. There's 4 lineages of Gila trout, and the relic lineages are all in New Mexico. Right here in Fry Creek, we have the South Diamond Creek lineage. In Ash Creek, we're going to put the Spruce Creek lineage, and there's also Main Diamond and Whiskey Creek lineages. We have fish from South Diamond in Fry Creek and also in Grapevine Creek, and we have Spruce Creek fish in Raspberry Creek, which is a tributary to the Blue River. And in New Mexico, there are a lot more recovery streams. We're just getting started in Arizona, so we have a long way to go, but we're making a lot of progress.
Anglers are able to fish for the Gila trout stocked into Fry Mesa Reservoir because they were surplus fish from the hatchery, primarily broodstock fish. There is a 1 fish bag and possession limit for Gila trout, but it's recommended to practice catch and release so other anglers may enjoy an opportunity to catch a Gila trout.
Well, that's our show for this week. For more information on Arizona Game and Fish or anything you've seen in tonight's episode, go to our website. I'm Jim Paxon for producers Carol Lynde and Gary Schafer. We'll see you next week.